Hi everyone, welcome to the Xtract3D large point cloud tutorial. In this video, we'll go over the recommended settings to enable before loading in a large point cloud. We'll then load in a large point cloud. We'll then use the quick orient tools inside of Move Mesh to align it to the primary planes. We will then slice and use a section view. We'll then use a section view to separate our point cloud into two different macro features that we can enable and disable as we want. And then in part 2 of this video, we'll go over the new create entity measurement features and the automated piping tools. So recommended settings. If you go into the plugin settings and click on Quick Start Guide, you'll be brought to this document right here, where one of the sections is performance tips for large point clouds. Here we go over things to enable and disable depending on your GPU, and the most important thing is to make sure that adaptive rendering is enabled. So we have all of them enabled already. They are enabled by default. So things are pretty good for our settings here. For context, I'm loading in a 6 GB E57 file for this video, and that contains around 400 million vertices, and it also contains per vertex color information. I'm running on a GTX 4060, so I'm able to run high render settings. For larger point clouds, like 25 gigabytes or something, I would lower that to low or very low. I would also make use of the edit mesh decimation features. So let's just load in a point cloud. I'll load in the E57. E57 files will be a little bit slower to load. Once you've actually loaded in your point cloud into a Solidworks part document and you've saved it, then it will save as a PBN file, which will be a similar size to the E57, but it will load in much faster because it uses our native file format. So I'll load it in with meters and center on import and make sure that I've flipped my Y and Z axis. This is dependent on your data. You'll know if you need this or not. And it'll take a minute or two to load, so I'll cut to when the mesh is fully loaded. Okay, so the data is now loaded. The next thing that we'll do is go into Move Mesh and align to our different planes. So I'll align this region here to the right plane. I'll use the paintbrush tool. I would not recommend using Smart Region for large point cloud data, as it's geared towards smaller data. It requires a KD tree to be built, which is quite memory intensive. Okay, that looks good enough. I'll then align to my top plane. It was already quite a close alignment. Okay, yeah, that looks pretty good to me. The last thing that I'll do is go into Quick Center, and I'll set, say, this corner as my new center. All right, then I'll go and rebase to lock in that transformation. Rebase requires a per vertex operation, so it'll take a few seconds, especially compared to the quick orient. But you'll know that it's done as soon as you see the translation and rotation being completely zero. And it's done, so I can click OK. And we're now ready for some slicing. Slicing with large point clouds is very similar to other data. You'll just want to make sure that you have GPU accelerated slicing. So I'll select my, my right plane here, and I'll go into slice. And we can basically slice just like we would any other piece of data. We can click to create an offset, do multi-slice, etc. Now, with large point clouds, if you have a lot of slices, you might want to hide the large point cloud and only focus on those slices. 2.1 introduces a feature where you can hide the meshes separately from the slices, and it's a global toggle for every single slice or every single non-slice. If I wanted to, I could do something similar with the top plane and go into slice. The more data is included in your slice, the slower it'll be. So this one takes quite a while because our floor is basically completely aligned with the top plane. But of course, if I were to click and create an offset, then it's much faster. So if we wanted to take some of this pipes on the roof, then we could click to create an offset up here and use some of the information. Or similarly, if we wanted data that's closer to the floor to create different outlines, then we could do something like that as well. By the way, if you want to disable slices always rendering on top of the rest of your data, that's toggleable as well. Just go into slice and turn off render slices on top. So now slices will only render when they're actually in front of the rest of the data, and you won't see them if you're on the other side of the point cloud. So GPU accelerated slicing versus non-GPU accelerated slicing. So what you've just seen was the GPU accelerated slicing, but if I were to go and disable that and then go back into slice, then it's going to take quite a few seconds to actually slice, and it can be significantly slower, especially if we are trying to really fiddle with the slice offset or do any sort of multi-slicing. So I'd really recommend keeping GPU accelerated slicing enabled. Next, we'll use some of our planes to create section views. So section views work just with any other piece of data that you have inside of Solidworks. So if I wanted to highlight, say, just the roof region here, then I could do that. In fact, I'll do exactly that because later I'll use some of these pipes and do some sectioning on those pipes to kind of automatically fit. Let's see. That looks pretty good, so I'll keep it as that. That'll allow us to demonstrate using this long pipe region here and this region over here as well. And then I'll use the third one to use the right plane. And actually, I'll just chop off that wall there. There we go. And we can also use things like the clip sphere to create even smaller views of our data. For this particular example, I'll just demonstrate using the section views. So say I have this region and I want to use my section views more, but I want to only keep this region of data, if that makes sense. What you can do is go into, select your model here, and if you go into Edit Mesh, and if you go into Section Tools, then I can actually copy that section to a new mesh and wait for it to be created. It'll take a little while because we're dealing with a lot of data here. Okay, so now that that new mesh is created, we'll then cut the section to points. Great. So if I click OK, then basically what we have now is if I disable the section view, I have my model separate from the rest of that pipe data. So now I can focus in on just these pipes, and I could even use my section tools again to focus just on the data that I want to focus on. I'm happy with this view for now, so... Oh, actually, no, I could take the top plane here and cut off some of the bottom to really just focus in on those large pipes there. And then I'll use section 2 as the right plane here. Perfect. So now that we've broken it off and we just have this smaller view of our data, So one of the new features in Xtract3D 2.1 is the ability to create full extruded cylinders from just selecting and clicking OK. So if I go into Create Entity here and go into Cylindrical Axis, I'm going to select Region and make sure that Box Selection is checked. I prefer this for cylindrical fits. If we check Create Extruded Cylinder here, then not only will we get the center axis, but it'll also attempt a full extrusion. So this already looks like enough pipe data. I could go down here and hold down Shift to add to that selected region. And just making sure that we're getting basically that full cylinder. So that looks pretty good. And if we click OK, then it will create that center axis and create all of the geometry necessary for an extrusion. And if you don't like the result, well, it's fully editable because we have the sketch that was defined by the circle, and then that was extruded all the way down to that endpoint right there too. So it's much faster than the process was before. Next, I could go in and do the same thing for these other pipes too. We do have these lights in the way, so we can choose to get rid of that either by just deleting them out of the data, or what we could also do is make sure that when we're selecting that cylinder that we just don't select that region. So if I go back into Create Entity and select this data up here, now we just select the region around. I also might want to get rid of that noise that's up there a little bit as well. And if I hold down Shift, then I'll get this region too. And then just stop when it starts to curve. So that looks pretty good. We, again, might want to remove some of those points up there. And some of those down here as well. And I'll click OK again. And perfect. Now we have both of these cylinders being fully extruded. So if I hide meshes, then we have the cylinders visible there. Of course, the curved parts will still need to be done manually, but this process takes much less time than it used to before. Last but not least, we'll go over some of the new quick measurement tools available. So I've hidden my slices, and I'll actually hide solids as well just to make things a little bit easier. And if we go into Create Entity and select Point and click, then if we turn on Show Measurements, each time we click on our mesh, we get information about the distance between those 2 points, and we can make super quick measurements of our point cloud data that way. If you click on the label, for example, if I click on the label for point 1 here, then my measurements will then be relative towards point 1. And as we click on the mesh, the distances will be relative to that new point. So you can get distances pretty quickly using points. If we instead go to something like a spline, then we'll get the total length along that line, which can also be helpful. And then similarly for the best fitted line, we'll get information about the start, end point, and the length that are automatically determined from the points. For the cylindrical axis tools, of course, this is a horrible fit for a cylinder, but we do get the radius as well as the start and length. So it can be helpful to gain those quick insights about your data before actually creating the SolidWorks entities.